June 15th. I wrapped the gold bracelet in velvet tonight. My fingers trembled as I folded the soft fabric over it, as though I were tucking in a child for the night. It's strange, isn't it, how an object so small can carry a weight far heavier than its metal? My grandmother wore this bracelet on her wedding day. I used to watch her twist it around her wrist, her skin paper thin, the veins like delicate threads beneath. She told me once that the bracelet was a gift from her mother, a symbol of continuity, a promise that no woman in our family would ever walk into a new life feeling alone. When my mother left her childhood home for the last time, she clutched this very bracelet in her fist. She told me later it was the only thing that kept her steady as she stepped into a future she couldn't see yet. And now, my son's bride was supposed to wear it. I thought, this will mean something. This will make me part of the day, but the more I folded the velvet, the more I wondered if I was only fooling myself. The bracelet is heavy for what it is, solid gold, a thickness you don't see in jewelry anymore. My son's fiancée, no, his soon-to-be wife, is the kind of woman who prefers light things, simple things. She wears thin chains, barely their rings. I don't know if she even likes gold. Still, I wrapped it. I wanted her to feel the way I did when my grandmother placed it in my hand for the first time, the weight of a history you didn't ask for but suddenly understand belongs to you. I wanted her to know that this isn't just an ornament. It's a lineage. It's every woman in our family, standing behind her as she takes her vows. But will she see that? I paused halfway through folding the velvet, staring at it, at the dull gleam of metal in the soft light of my bedroom lamp. I imagined her face when I hand it to her. Will she smile politely and thank me, only to leave it in its box? Will she wear it out of obligation, counting the minutes until she can take it off? I am not naive to my place in their story. I am the mother-in-law. A guest in their beginning. Perhaps this is my way of insisting on having a seat at the table, of pressing my fingerprint into their memory of this day. I closed the box slowly, feeling the click of its latch like the sound of a final decision. This will mean something, I told myself again. Even if it only means something to me. June 16th. The plane engine hummed like a lullaby I couldn't sleep to, steady, low, constant, but instead of soothing me, it kept me awake, rattling through the hollow parts of me that no seatbelt or thin airline blanket could hold together. I shifted in my narrow seat, pulling the scratchy fabric tighter around my shoulders, as if I could cocoon myself from the reality of where I was going and why. I kept practicing what I'd say when I handed it over. These are for you. For your future. For our family. But no matter how I said it in my head, it sounded like begging. Begging to matter, begging to be remembered. Begging not to be pushed aside as just his mother, a role that feels smaller and smaller with each passing year. I closed my eyes and repeated the words silently, trying to imagine the right tone, soft but not pathetic, warm but not suffocating. How do you tell a stranger, a woman your son chose over everyone else, that a piece of your soul is now hers to keep? I opened my eyes and caught my reflection in the oval window. It startled me, as reflections on planes often do. The glass is merciless. The fluorescent cabin lighting through my age back at me in full detail, the soft collapse of skin around my mouth, the faint sag at my jaw, the way my tired eyes seemed to carry every sleepless night I'd spent worrying about him, about them. There she was. The woman who had spent years giving everything to a boy who now belonged more to someone else. I wondered what he'd tell her about me. Did he talk about my hands, the ones that braided his hair when he was little, the ones that sewed his costumes for school plays, the ones that held him too tightly the day he told me he was leaving? Did he tell her how I made his favorite soup every time he was sick? Or am I just a story to her, a character named Mom who exists only to hand over traditions and recipes and heirlooms? I thought about the bracelet tucked carefully into my carry-on beneath my feet. I imagined opening the box in front of her, watching her polite, guarded smile, hearing her say thank you in a voice that might carry more obligation than gratitude. What if she doesn't understand? What if she doesn't even care? My throat tightened. I pressed my forehead against the cool window and watched the clouds slide by below, blurred by the faint sting of tears I refused to let fall. Don't cry. Not here. Not yet. The engine droned on, relentless, as though mocking me. There was nowhere to run, not from the plane, not from this moment, not from the truth that my boy was no longer just mine. And tomorrow, I'd hand over that bracelet. And with it, a piece of myself. The hotel smelled like lilies, the kind that fill rooms at funerals. Beautiful, but suffocating. I tried to convince myself it was fitting for a wedding, a celebration, but all I could think of was how lilies always seemed to mark endings, not beginnings. I rolled my suitcase through the lobby, its wheels clicking too loudly against the polished tile. Couples in light linen outfits and matching smiles drifted past me, their voices hushed with that easy joy that belongs to people who have no idea how heavy life can get. At the reception desk, a girl with a perfect bun and an even more perfect smile handed me my key card. "Enjoy your stay," she chirped, as though I wasn't here to hand over something that has felt like a part of my own body. I rode the elevator in silence, staring at the patterned carpet, my chest tight from the smell of those lilies that seemed to follow me even here. When I reached my floor, I stopped in the hallway for a moment, gripping the suitcase handle as if it could ground me. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over his name. "My son." I typed the words, "I'm here." 3 dots appeared. My heart fluttered like it used to when he'd run to me after school, all knees and elbows and breathless stories about his day. But then, they disappeared. No reply. I stared at the screen, waiting. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he was talking to her. Maybe he saw my message and didn't know what to say. Or maybe this was how it would be now, me on the periphery, waiting for scraps of attention that may never come. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, my fingers brushing the box inside my handbag, the bracelet, still wrapped in its velvet shroud. I wondered if he'd told her about it. I wondered if he'd told her about me at all. Inside the room, the air was too cold, the kind of cold that doesn't refresh you but numbs you instead. I set the bracelet box on the desk carefully, almost ceremonially, as though placing an offering on an altar. It looked so small there, so inconsequential, and yet I knew it carried generations inside it. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the door. I wanted to call him, to knock on their door if they were here already, to say, "I'm here. I made it. Can I see you?" But instead, I sat in silence, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, feeling the hollow space where his answer should have been. The lilies lingered in the air, their sweetness pressing down on me until I could hardly breathe. And in that room, I realized, I had arrived. But I wasn't sure I belonged. I stared at the door for nearly an hour before I could stand. My body felt stiff, like I'd been bracing for impact ever since I stepped off the plane. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to see him. The hallway carpet muffled my steps as I made my way to his room. I paused outside the door, my knuckles hovering just shy of knocking. What if she opened it? What if his face carried that strained politeness, the one that said, "Oh. You're here already?" I knocked. Footsteps. Then the sound of the lock turning. When the door opened, there he was. My boy. Except he wasn't my boy anymore. He was a man in a crisp white shirt, his hair styled the way she liked it, his face holding a glow I hadn't seen since he left home. "Mom," he said, smiling, but it wasn't the unguarded grin I'd been hoping for. It was softer. Controlled. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Hi, sweetheart." He hugged me, but it was quick. One of those embraces that feels more like acknowledgement than connection. Over his shoulder, I saw her. She was perched on the arm of a chair, scrolling through her phone, her legs crossed neatly at the ankle. She looked up at me with a polite smile, her expression perfectly composed, as though she had been preparing for this moment, too. "Hi, Mrs. Taylor," she said. I nodded, trying to summon warmth. "Please, call me Anne." There was an awkward beat of silence before I remembered why I'd come. My hand brushed the strap of my handbag, feeling the box inside. My pulse quickened. "I brought something for you," I said, turning my attention to her. It's a family piece. My grandmother wore it at her wedding. My mother, too. I thought. My voice faltered. I looked at my son, hoping to find encouragement, but he was unreadable. She tilted her head slightly, curious but cautious. Oh, that's thoughtful. Thoughtful. The word landed like a stone in my chest. I reached for the box, pulling it from my bag with deliberate care. It's a bracelet. I thought maybe you'd like to wear it, on the day. I handed it to her, my fingers reluctant to let go. She took it delicately, as though it were fragile, or perhaps as though she wasn't sure if she wanted to hold it at all. It's lovely, she said after a moment. Really? I nodded, forcing a smile. But deep down, I couldn't tell if she meant it. It's lovely, she said, her voice soft but with an edge of hesitation. She glanced at my son, then back at me. But, maybe we could wait? Maybe you could give it to me on the wedding day itself. You know, to make it special. My smile tightened. Of course. If that's what you'd like. She returned the box to my hands, her nails brushing my fingers lightly, already moving back toward her phone. And just like that, the bracelet, my grandmother's, my mother's, the one I thought would tie me to her, was back with me. I nodded again, as though we'd shared some intimate understanding, though I felt more like I'd just been dismissed. It'll be perfect, she added quickly, her tone bright and polite. But I couldn't help but wonder if she meant it'll be easier if we do this later. My son cleared his throat. Thanks for bringing it, Mom. That's nice of you. Nice. I forced another smile, my face aching with the effort. And then I left, the bracelet heavier than before, as though it carried not just history now, but rejection. I spread my dress on the bed like a flag of surrender. The fabric was soft under my fingers, but lifeless. It was the kind of dress no one would whisper about, modest, safe, chosen not because I loved it, but because I knew it wouldn't draw attention. That's what mothers of the groom are supposed to do, isn't it? Fade into the background. Be present but not seen. I sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing the skirt out as if that could change how it felt. I'd spent hours in the department store searching for it, letting saleswomen bring me sequins and silks I'd quietly rejected. I didn't want to be the mother they'd talk about, too loud, too young, too unwilling to let go. So I chose this one. Pink. Understated. Respectable. But as I stared at it, it didn't make me feel dignified. It made me feel invisible. I wondered what she'd wear. My future daughter-in-law. Would her dress be modern? Trendy? Something that made me feel like I'd been left behind by a world I no longer recognized? I thought of her effortless way of moving, her sleek hair, the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to ask permission to belong. I picked up the dress and held it against me, looking at my reflection in the full-length mirror by the desk. The woman staring back at me was a stranger. The pink washed me out, made the lines around my mouth deeper, my shoulders narrower. I thought about all the other women who would be there, her family, her friends, polished and perfect, part of her world. And me? I was just the mother of the groom. The role felt both monumental and meaningless at the same time. I imagined walking into that room on the day of the wedding, imagined the way people would look at me. Would they see a woman who had raised the man at the center of this celebration? Or just another obligatory guest in a forgettable dress? I thought about buying something else, something bold. But it was too late for that. And maybe, deep down, I didn't want bold. Bold takes up space. Bold asks to be noticed. No. This was safer. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that wearing it meant giving up some small claim to myself. Like waving a white flag. Like saying, I know my place, I won't make trouble. I draped the dress back across the bed and stepped away. It was ready. But I wasn't. June 17th. The venue was breathtaking. Lanterns hung like constellations, scattered across the high beams and woven between the rafters as if the stars themselves had been coaxed down to hover above us. The air shimmered with warmth, laughter spilled like champagne, light and effervescent, mixing with the faint notes of a string quartet hidden somewhere in the corner. Perfume, wine, and polished wood mingled into a single intoxicating scent that should have felt like magic. A fairy tale. But as I stepped inside, the warmth wasn't for me. The hum of voices didn't falter, but it didn't shift toward me either. No one's gaze lifted. No one paused mid-conversation to call my name or wave me over. The room seemed to fold inward, all its brightness and charm tilting away from where I stood at the threshold. It wasn't deliberate, not exactly, but it was palpable, the kind of exclusion that slinks beneath the skin rather than shouts in your face. I adjusted the strap of my purse, feeling the weight of it tug at my shoulder, grounding me in a way I wasn't sure I wanted. The bracelet inside, silver, delicate, a gift, pressed against my palm as I gripped the leather too tightly. I could feel every curve of it, the tiny clasp digging into my flesh like a reminder. My fingers curled around it until it throbbed, a dull, rhythmic beat that matched my pulse. It was like holding a second heart, one that didn't belong to me but refused to let go. I told myself to breathe, to find a place to stand, to look busy, to look like I belonged. But my legs felt too stiff, my shoes suddenly too loud against the polished floor as I took a cautious step further in. A burst of laughter erupted from a nearby table, sharp, bright, intimate. It felt like glass shattering. I couldn't help but glance over, hoping for a familiar face, a gesture, anything. Instead, I caught only silhouettes, backs turned toward me, heads tipped close together, secrets exchanged in the easy way people do when they know they are safe with one another. I wasn't safe here. My heart began to drum faster, like it wanted out, like it didn't belong in this room any more than I did. I found myself drifting toward the edge of the crowd, staying close to the wall where the shadow softened the edges of the light. From there, I could pretend I was simply observing, that my distance was intentional. I touched the bracelet through the purse again, letting its cool metal press against my skin. It anchored me, but it also reminded me why I was here. I couldn't leave, not yet. And so I stood, still and silent, while the room spun around me, dazzling and indifferent. And then, there he was. My boy. My little boy in a suit, smiling the smile I thought was mine. It hit me like a sudden fall, the kind that knocks the air out of you before you can brace yourself. He looked taller than I remembered, older too, shoulders squared, chin lifted with a confidence that wasn't there the last time I saw him. But the smile, oh, that smile. It still carried the same softness, the same light that used to make the darkest rooms bearable. My chest ached at the sight of it, at the knowledge that it now bloomed for someone else. He was laughing with her family. They surrounded him effortlessly, hands on his shoulders, kisses on his cheeks, their voices wrapping around his name like a prayer. They said it with such reverence, as though they had always been his, as though I had never existed. Each touch, each easy exchange, was a claim laid on him. I stayed frozen where I stood, my breath catching on the edges of a dozen unsaid words. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did, and didn't know what to do with me. The thought sliced deeper than I expected. I felt myself fold inward, smaller and smaller, as if I could disappear into the shadows at the edge of the room. My grip on the bracelet tightened until I swore I felt it leave an imprint, a quiet reminder of what I had lost, of what I still carried but could no longer reach. The music swelled, laughter rose, and I remained there, silent, unseen, watching my boy belong to someone else. I waited for someone to guide me. An usher. A cousin. Anyone. No one came. So I found a chair near the back. It felt like exile. The distance between us stretched like an ocean, impossible to cross. My dress creased when I sat, the fabric folding in on itself as though mirroring me. My throat felt raw from swallowing everything I wanted to say. I'm here. I'm sorry. Do you still think of me? Around me, the room thrummed with joy, an unbroken current I couldn't step into. I folded my hands over my lap, pressing them tight as if I could hold myself together by force alone, and let the moment press down on me until I could barely breathe. And still, I watched him. Silent. Unseen. For a moment, I almost convinced myself it was enough just to look at him. To let my eyes memorize the curve of his shoulders, the way his hair curled just slightly at the back like it used to when he was little. I could sit here and pretend I belonged to this moment, even from a distance. But then he turned. It was brief, half a glance over his shoulder, maybe drawn by some movement, maybe by nothing at all. But his eyes brushed mine, just for an instant, and the world tilted. He froze. And so did I. My breath caught, a tiny gasp I prayed no one heard. His expression shifted, hesitation first, then something unreadable. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. But he didn't look away immediately either. A dozen words clamored at the back of my throat. Hi. I'm here. I've missed you. Can I hug you? Can I still be your mother? But before I could move, before I could decide if I even had the right, someone touched his arm, her. She leaned in close, whispered something, and his face softened again, turned back toward her. He laughed at whatever she said, that easy, unburdened sound I used to think belonged to us. And just like that, I was invisible again. My hands shook as I smoothed the crease in my dress, pretending it was the fabric I was fussing over, not my unraveling self. I felt the bracelet inside my purse again, pressing into my palm like a secret I couldn't bear to share. I wanted to leave. God, I wanted to stand up and walk out, to escape this beautiful, unbearable room that smelled of belonging I didn't have. But my feet refused to move. Because even from here, in my exile, I could still see him. And for now, that had to be enough. Her vows were soft and poetic. The kind of words you could tell she had written with him in mind for years, lilting phrases about forever, about finding home in his laugh, about walking through every storm hand in hand. The room stilled for her, drinking her in. She was beautiful, I couldn't deny that. Every tearful smile, every careful tremble in her voice pulled them closer, wrapped them into her love story. And then it was his turn. His vows were warm and rehearsed. He spoke with the practiced steadiness of someone who had said these words 100 times in his head, maybe to her, maybe in the quiet of his car on the way here. His voice had deepened since I last heard it, no longer the boyish tone I remembered, but a man's, solid and sure. And then he said it. I thank those who shaped me into who I am today. My whole body leaned forward before I even realized I was moving, as though I could catch the sound of my name before it fell. I waited. It had to come next. Surely it had to. But it didn't. Her parents. His mentors. Friends. Family. Not me. My name never came. The words blurred into one long hum, a sound that filled the air but didn't touch me. The world tilted slightly off its axis. My fingers gripped the edge of my seat, nails pressing crescents into the soft fabric, the sting grounding me in this unkind reality. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up in the middle of that perfect fairy tale ceremony and tell them all, I was there. I was there when he had nothing. I was there when his knees were scraped and his heart was broken. I was the one who shaped him too. But instead, I clapped. I clapped like everyone else. Like I wasn't unraveling in my chair. Like my heart wasn't splintering into 1,000 quiet pieces no one would ever notice. The sound of my own hands was distant, hollow. He didn't look at me. Not once. Maybe he didn't see me, tucked away in the back like an afterthought. Or maybe he did, and decided it was easier to pretend I wasn't there. The applause died down, replaced by soft sniffles and laughter, the ceremony moving forward without me. And I sat there, a ghost in a living room full of joy, my pulse still hammering in my throat. I thought I had braced myself for this. But nothing prepares you for hearing your child thank the world for making him who he is, while acting like you were never part of it. My hand slipped into my purse. The velvet pouch was there, warm against my fingers. It seemed to hum with its own pulse, as though it knew why I had brought it, as though it was begging me to be brave. Now, I told myself. Now's the moment. I could picture it so clearly. Standing. Walking toward them while all those faces turned to look. Reaching her at the altar, or maybe at the reception table later, pressing the pouch into her palm. I could even hear myself saying the words I'd rehearsed in the quiet of my car, "This is yours now." A small, simple offering. A piece of me. A piece of him, but no one turned to me. No one asked. I sat there in the back, invisible in my creased dress, clutching the little pouch like it was the only thing tethering me to this moment. In my head, I kept replaying it. I'd walk up, meet her gaze, and she'd understand. She'd see me, really see me, and know what it cost me to be here. But the vision faltered quickly. In my mind, her face twisted. Not in gratitude, but in confusion. Or worse, pity. That look. I could almost feel it like a hand pressing me down, reminding me of where I stood in this new arrangement of his life, on the outside. An uninvited thought crept in, was this gift even wanted? Was I? So it stayed hidden. My fingers curled tighter around the pouch until the velvet wrinkled and bunched beneath my grip. It felt heavier than it had in the car, heavier than it had when I decided to bring it. It was supposed to be a bridge, something that made me part of his new beginning, but right now, it felt like a secret I wasn't allowed to share. The ceremony moved on without me. Toasts, smiles, the rhythmic swells of applause at all the right moments. My boy, no, their boy, laughing, radiant, alive in a way that made my chest ache. And me? I sat in the shadows, still as stone, my gift burning like a coal in my hands. I wondered if he'd even notice me here. I wondered if he wanted to. The music swelled. People began to stand, clinking glasses, leaning into one another with the kind of closeness I couldn't touch. I stayed seated, my hands trembling slightly as I tucked the pouch deeper into my purse, out of sight, as if hiding it would quiet the storm it had stirred inside me. I told myself there would be another moment. Later. When it would feel easier. But deep down, I knew I might leave tonight still carrying it, unopened, unoffered. And that thought hurt worst of all. Her family gathered like a Renaissance painting, each one falling perfectly into place without needing to be told where to stand. Parents at the center, siblings framing the sides, neighbors leaning in like they belonged there as much as anyone else. Even distant relatives, the kind you only see at weddings and funerals, seemed effortlessly at home in that tableau of belonging. I stood off to the side, half in the frame of their joy but not truly part of it, watching the easy choreography of people who had always been welcome. Someone called out, "Mom, come in for one." For a brief, electric moment, I thought they meant me. My heart leapt at the sound of that word, Mom. It was my name first. It was the first name I ever loved. I stepped forward, smiling too quickly, feeling heat crawl up my neck as I tried to smooth my dress with my free hand, tucking away the awkwardness of being summoned so suddenly. "Okay, Mom, smile." The flash went off. And then I understood. They weren't calling for me. They never were. It was her. Her mother. I stood there frozen, blinking against the burst of the camera light, my own smile faltering as they shifted, rearranging themselves for the next shot. I felt their glances skim past me, polite but dismissive, like I was a placeholder filling empty space. "Thank you, sweetie." "Okay, just family now," someone said. And just like that, I was waved away. Like a prop no one needed anymore, I retreated to the edge of the room, my movements small, careful, as though making myself less visible would soften the ache. My chest burned with the kind of humiliation that makes you want to fold in on yourself and disappear. I pretended to check my phone, to fidget with the strap of my purse, anything to avoid meeting anyone's eyes and seeing pity, or worse, indifference, reflected back at me. The laughter carried on without pause, her family arranging themselves for more pictures, more memories I would never belong to. They didn't even notice I was gone. I leaned against the far wall, gripping the velvet pouch in my purse like it might keep me standing. In my mind, I could hear myself saying the words I'd practiced 1,000 times, "I'm so proud of you. I love you. This is yours now." But no one asked me to step back in. No one called my name. And so I stayed at the edges of their celebration, half ghost, half mother, holding everything I wanted to give him in silence. They toasted to love, to family, to new beginnings. Crystal glasses caught the light like prisms, scattering it across the room in tiny fragments that danced on the walls and faces of the people who belonged there. Laughter bloomed in every corner, effortless and full. They spoke of blessings, of gratitude, of the beauty of two families becoming one. Her father stood first, raising his glass with the authority of a king. His words rolled out smooth and commanding, each one earning a chorus of nods and smiles. He spoke of his daughter's grace, of the man she had chosen, of the life they would build together. He spoke as though he had known my boy forever. As though his history began with them. Her mother followed, dabbing tears from her cheeks as she lifted her glass. Her voice wavered in that perfectly endearing way, her every word received like gospel. People leaned in closer, letting her emotion wash over them. She was the queen of the evening, beloved and unchallenged. And then the room erupted in applause. I raised my glass when they did. The stem of it felt cold and fragile between my fingers, like it might shatter if I held it too tightly. I pressed it to my lips, but they wouldn't move. They were frozen, heavy with the words I couldn't say. To love. To family. To new beginnings. I wanted to speak them, to offer my toast, my piece of this celebration. But my mouth wouldn't work. My throat closed up around the taste of champagne, around the ache of being on the outside of a life I used to live at the very center of. I glanced toward him, my boy. He was beaming, his arm draped around her as though it had always belonged there. He clinked his glass against hers, his smile full and unburdened. The sound of their laughter intertwined, brighter than any music playing in the background. He didn't look at me. No one did. I lowered my glass slowly, pretending I had sipped, pretending I had joined them in their joy. My hand trembled slightly as I set it back on the table, careful not to draw attention, careful to seem like I belonged when I felt like anything but. Inside, I was screaming 1,000 things, memories, apologies, declarations of love, but outside, I stayed still. Composed. Invisible. The applause died down, and the hum of conversation filled the room again, wrapping around me like a current I couldn't step into. I folded my hands in my lap, feeling the velvet pouch still pressing against my side, its weight reminding me of everything I hadn't said and might never say. I raised my glass. But my lips didn't work. The music swelled. Violins and laughter wove together, rising and falling like a tide that carried everyone in the room but me. The melody seemed to wrap itself around the chandeliers, to shimmer in the very air, to insist that this night was something sacred. Lights shimmered, casting everything in a golden glow that made even the smallest gestures look extraordinary. A hand brushing a shoulder. A smile shared across the table. A kiss on the cheek. It all glowed like the moments people carried with them for a lifetime. Joy vibrated in every corner. I could feel it, humming in the floorboards, in the chatter, in the rhythm of the glasses clinking together. It should have been infectious, that kind of joy. But it only deepened the hollow inside me, made me more aware of my own stillness against their movement. No one reached for my hand. No one even noticed when I slipped out. It was almost too easy, gathering my purse, keeping my head low, timing my steps with the music so they would blend into the sound of the celebration. My shoes barely whispered against the polished floor as I passed through clusters of laughing strangers who didn't see me, who didn't have to. I paused for a moment at the doorway, my hand grazing the frame, as if some invisible force might stop me, pull me back in, call my name. It didn't. Behind me, the celebration swelled again, another toast, another round of applause, another piece of a life I wasn't part of anymore. I stood there in the in-between for a heartbeat longer, staring at that velvet pouch tucked safely in my purse. I'd carried it like a promise. Like a bridge. But it was still with me. Unopened. Ungiven. I pictured walking back in, imagined their faces if I did, surprise, confusion, maybe even pity. I thought about pressing it into his hands, or hers, forcing myself into this story even for a moment. But the weight in my chest told me the truth, this wasn't my story anymore. So I left. The hallway outside was quiet, cool, a stark contrast to the golden warmth behind me. My steps echoed more than I wanted them to. I pressed the purse tighter to my side, holding on to it like a lifeline, like if I gripped hard enough, I wouldn't fall apart entirely. Outside, the night was vast and still. The air smelled of rain and summer, of something ending and something beginning, though I wasn't sure which belonged to me. I told myself I'd try again. Someday. But tonight, I walked to my car unseen, a mother slipping out of her son's new life without a sound. The room was colder than the venue. Quieter, too. The hum of conversation, the clinking glasses, the music that had filled every corner of the hall, it all seemed impossibly far away now. The silence here wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It pressed down on my shoulders, seeped into my bones, filled the empty spaces no one had touched in years. I set my purse down on the small table by the window, my fingers still trembling as I unfastened the clasp. The velvet pouch slid out easily, soft and familiar. I held it for a moment, just staring at it resting in my hands. My heart drummed in my ears, louder than anything else. Slowly, I untied the string and peeled back the fabric. The bracelet spilled into my palm, cool against my skin. It gleamed in the lamplight, catching every dull beam, transforming it into something almost celestial. Like it knew it still mattered. Like it wanted me to believe I did, too. My thumb traced the tiny, intricate details on its surface, every curve and etching etched into my memory long before tonight. I'd chosen it carefully once, with all the love and hope I could hold. I had imagined this moment would be different, me, slipping it onto her wrist, telling her what it meant, watching her understand. Instead, it sat here in my hand, untouched, unclaimed. "You were supposed to mean something today," I whispered. The words scraped out of me, ragged and small, barely making it past my lips. My voice cracked. And then the tears came, not the polite kind you can blink away in a crowded room. These were the kind that broke you apart, that blurred the edges of everything until all that was left was the hurt. They carved hot tracks down my face, landing soundlessly in my lap as I hunched forward, clutching the bracelet like it was the only thing tethering me to this earth. I thought of him, my boy. My little boy, smiling that easy, radiant smile that used to be mine, now shining for someone else. I thought of her family, the way they surrounded him, claimed him, toasted him, as if he had always been theirs. I thought of how no one had called my name. I curled my fingers around the bracelet, closing it into a fist. Maybe tomorrow I'd be strong enough to put it away. Or give it to him. Or leave it on her doorstep with a note she'd never read. But tonight, I just sat there in the quiet, holding this tiny piece of love that hadn't found its place. And I let it break me. This morning, I found a note under my door. At first, I thought it was nothing, a hotel receipt, a flyer slipped under by staff, but the moment I saw it, my breath caught. My name wasn't written, just a single word scrawled across the envelope in the handwriting I knew better than my own, Mom. My fingers shook as I picked it up. I traced the letters, feeling the grooves of his pen like they were etched straight into my skin. For a long moment, I just stared at it, afraid to open it. Afraid of what it might say. Then I unfolded the paper inside. "Mom, I'm sorry. I saw you leave. I wanted to talk, but it was her day. She didn't want to wear the bracelet. Said it felt like carrying someone else's story. I didn't push. I didn't want to upset her. Please don't be hurt. I love you." I read it once. Then again. And again, until the words blurred. My throat tightened. The edges of the letter crumpled as I held it too tightly, as if I could force myself inside the spaces between his sentences and find more than what he'd written. She didn't want to wear the bracelet. I felt that sentence like a bruise. Not anger. Not malice. Just a truth, written with the same quiet, careful tone he'd always used when trying to protect me. She didn't want to carry it. She didn't want to carry me. I didn't push. Of course he didn't. He was his father's son in that way, knowing when to retreat, when to keep the peace. He thought he was protecting her, maybe protecting himself. Maybe protecting me from a bigger hurt. Please don't be hurt. As if those words could rearrange my heart. As if love, his love, could soften this particular kind of pain. I sat on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in my hands, the bracelet still on the nightstand where I'd left it last night. The sunlight spilled across it, making it gleam as if mocking me. I picked it up and held it in my palm again. It felt heavier than it had yesterday, as if all the weight of my unspoken hopes and quiet failures had sunk into its metal. She didn't want it. He couldn't take it. And now it was mine again, a relic of a role I no longer knew how to play. I pressed the bracelet to my lips, closed my eyes, and whispered, "I love you too." It was all I could give him. For now, it had to be enough. I read it again. And again. Until the loops and slants of his handwriting blurred into one long, aching smear. My eyes traced the same lines, but each time they struck differently, carving deeper into the soft parts of me I'd thought I'd hardened long ago. She didn't want my story. The words sank like stones. And my son, my boy, didn't fight for it. He hadn't argued. He hadn't said, "This matters to my mother. It matters to me." He'd simply accepted her refusal, smoothed over the rough edge of my offering the way he'd always learned to smooth over mine. The bracelet wasn't too heavy for her. It was me. I was too heavy. Oh, complicated. Too full of a history that didn't fit into the golden new life they'd built without me. My throat tightened, but no tears came this time. I'd cried enough last night. I wasn't empty, no, emptiness would have been a mercy. I was too full of everything I couldn't say. I reached for the bracelet, letting its cool metal rest against my skin once more. It didn't glow the way it had in the venue. It looked duller now, almost shy in the pale morning light. With deliberate care, I put it back in the velvet pouch. My hands didn't tremble this time. It felt almost ritualistic, folding the pouch closed, tugging the drawstring until it cinched tight, pressing it flat in my palm as if sealing away a part of myself. I thought about leaving it behind. Leaving it on the bed, a quiet surrender. Or slipping it under his door with a note of my own, just 2 words, "For you." It's all I have left. Of where I came from. Of who I was before I became invisible. I stood in the quiet hotel room, staring at the thin strip of sunlight stretching across the floor, and thought about the life I'd had, the one where my name was spoken first, where I didn't have to fight to be seen, where my story wasn't something someone else could refuse to carry. I used to belong somewhere. Now I belonged only to myself. And maybe to this bracelet. It wasn't enough. But it was something. So I held it close, because when everything else had been taken or forgotten, the story it carried, my story, was still mine.